Okay, zoek we nach dem Klicker. Moment.
So I'm going to do this in English if everybody's okay with this, because my German is horrible. So I'm going to put everybody to sleep if I do this in German. Yeah, so my name is Pierre. Awesome. Thanks a lot. I'm the co-founder of Searoutes, and I think the presentation that I'm about to do is going to resonate with the panel right before that was talking about basically decarbonizing the logistics. So what I'm going to show you is one solution, or at least I hope a beginning of solution. All right, so just to give you a few numbers and to follow up on the panel right before. So the footprint, and I think this is Otto from Otto Schart from Kühnenagel that was saying this, the footprint from freight, the carbon footprint that's emitted just because of freight represents about 8% of all the carbon emissions today. And this is growing. This is growing. If you look at some of the studies, by 2050, this could rise to basically a third of all carbon emissions. So freight, this is huge. And so this is pushing legislation. This is why you see things like the Green Deal and stuff like that. The second point of pressure you have to shippers is the consumers. So today there's about a third of people that are buying green. But more and more, there's another third that's waiting to be convinced. More and more people want to buy stuff that is green. You know, a pair of shoes that is net, so that's climate neutral, or a table from IKEA that has no impact on climate. So you get these two pressure points on shippers, and shippers are there in the middle, and they have to reduce their footprint, and they don't really know what to do about it. So we have a solution. But before I get to it, one of the problems shippers are facing when measuring CO2 is that when they measure it, they can't really differentiate things really well. So when they're shipping goods from, say, the US to Asia, looking at the different options they have, they can't really differentiate scenarios. The problem is the way we measure CO2 today doesn't give you that granularity. So what they're facing is, well, they have no choice. They can't really make a decision. They can't really choose something that will reduce their CO2. But what you see is, depending on the different services, the ships are traveling at different speeds, they're traveling different distances, they're going through different weather, and they're traveling through different ports. The fact is they're actually emitting different amounts of CO2. So if you give that information to shippers, Nike, IKEA, all the big ones, they'll be able to make decisions which will reduce their CO2 in the end. So one of the big problems is nobody today reports or measures CO2 in a way that allows shippers to take action. That's the issue. That's what we're trying to solve. So put it simply, that's what we're doing. We try to find the most efficient route, door to door, which emits the less amount of CO2, and the shippers, in the end, take actions on what the best route is. Because you like numbers, I'm going to give you a little bit more, and I'll tell you exactly how we're doing this. So bear with me for a second. What's the issue in measuring CO2 today in the way it's being done? So if you're measuring CO2 emitted by a container, what you want is a distance, A to B, and then you want to know what vessel exactly sailed on that particular distance, and you want to know its speed. Basically, once you have that, you have everything you need to be able to compute CO2. And one of the problems that we're having is that the way it's being done today doesn't really differentiate exactly what speed it is, what vessel, what's the exact distance that was sailed, and all of this, people don't use that, and it's all based on averages. And when you look at the numbers, basically, with the methods that are out there today, you end up having the same numbers for two ships that are very different. One is 2 times the size of the other. One is sailing faster or slower here than the other. And the schedules and the distances are very different. You have like 3,000 kilometer differences. So if you use the tools that you have today at your disposal, you end up with exactly the same numbers of emissions, about a ton per container, but in fact it's simple to double. So that's obviously wrong. That's an example, not to put names out there, but that's an example of the variance that you get between the different companies. So if you do the math right, you can see that the tons of CO2 emitted varies from almost simple to double, and that's 0.5 to 1.5 ton per container, so it's really high. Cool. We do the same for air, because there's still a lot of freight forwarding companies that use air. So it's the same business here. Some methods out there don't take into account the phases that are due to so LTO. This is taxiing all around the airport, so landing and takeoff, and that accounts for about 10% of CO2 emissions. So those are a lot of numbers, but basically my point here is that if you have the right method to measure CO2, then people will be able to differentiate things better, and in the end make the decisions that will allow them to reduce their CO2. And so obviously you can use what we're doing in reporting, so that's an example of how people do reporting today. That's not too sexy. Better is an example where we can actually choose a particular service from A to B depending on the CO2. And in the end, this is what we're trying to favor. Cool. So we have a few clients that we're doing this for, and this is growing. We're super happy that they chose to work with us. Pretty big freight forwarders and growing. And we're a small team doing this, based in Marseille, where right now everybody's at home because they have to stay at home. They closed all the bars and restaurants starting yesterday because of this Corona story. But we have 4 people there, and we're 2 still in Hamburg and growing. So if you're interested in what we're doing, feel free to send me an email, find us on LinkedIn, and yeah.
Okay, thanks, Pierre. Is your technology already in use in most of the shippers, or with whom are you starting with next?
Yes, it's a very good question. So we're live. People use us, both freight forwarders and shippers. We have an API, so people can buy our data. We have about 60 clients already. So yeah, this has been rolled out, and we're live.
Okay, thanks a lot.